The night Dr. Maya Ellis found the receipt, the world did not explode. It didn't shatter or crack or even tremble. Instead, it shifted, quietly, devastatingly, like the soft click of a lock turning on a vault she didn't know existed. One moment, she was smooth. And if stories like this make your heart race, if you're the kind of person who needs to know what happens when a woman finally stops shrinking for a man, then breathe, settle in, and stay close. You'll want to hear every word. And while you're here, show a little love to the channel. Like, comment, follow, because this is just the beginning. And the next chapters go darker, sharper, and far more satisfying than you think. Maya did not scream. She didn't drop the receipt or stumble or gasp dramatically like the movies promised she would. No, Maya Ellis, Harvard graduate, civil rights attorney, woman raised by a mother who survived 3 jobs and a racist mortgage system, had been trained her entire life to absorb shocks without flinching. So she folded the paper once, twice, slipped it into her palm as if she'd simply found a stray thread, and she kept breathing. Ethan's voice drifted from the kitchen, warm, careless, oblivious. "Babe, did you see my cufflinks? The gold ones, my father's?" His father's cufflinks. The same father who told every reporter Ethan inherited both his business acumen and his classic American family values. The same father who shook Maya's hand at their wedding reception and said, with a smile that never reached his eyes, "You've done well for yourself, young lady." Maya exhaled slowly, smoothing her expression into the familiar, polished calm she wore at board meetings and depositions. She found the cufflinks on the dresser, placed them in their velvet box, and walked to the doorway. "They're right here," she said, her voice steady enough to terrify her. Ethan kissed her on the cheek, the way men kiss women they assume will always be there. What would I do without you? A better question, Maya thought, was what he'd been doing with someone else. But she smiled, a trained, serene curve of the lips. She had lived too long in a world where black women were punished for anger and doubted for pain. She would not give Ethan, or anyone, the satisfaction of seeing her unravel. Not tonight. At the gala, Maya moved through the glittering Manhattan crowd like she was made of satin and steel. Everyone greeted her as the other half of New York's golden couple. The powerful attorney, the elegant wife, the woman who'd helped Ethan transform his company's image into something young, fresh, progressive. The crowd adored them. Cameras loved them. Investors trusted them. Only Maya knew that 3 inches from her heart, in the tiny pocket of her clutch, lay the receipt that split her marriage in 2. She watched Ethan laugh with donors, his hand resting lightly on her lower back. She remembered when that touch meant something, when she believed they were building a life that was both theirs, not just his with her neatly slotted in the supporting role. But the truth was brutally simple. He'd found someone else. And Maya, who had survived far worse than betrayal, was beginning to understand something sharper than heartbreak. Clarity. She didn't know who the woman was yet, but she would. She didn't know how long Eden had been rotting beneath their perfect life, but she would find out. And as she lifted her champagne glass, smiling for a photographer, 2 decisions crystallized in her mind with ice-cold certainty. First, she would gather every piece of the truth, not just suspicions, evidence. Second, when she finally confronted her husband, it would not be with tears or pleading or hysteria. It would be with a plan, because the night Maya Ellis found the receipt was not the night her marriage ended. It was the night she decided she would choose herself, quietly, strategically, and with a precision Ethan Whitmore would never see coming. From the outside, Dr. Maya Ellis and Ethan Whitmore looked like the kind of couple Manhattan society invented just to remind everyone else how small they were. She was brilliance draped in elegance, a civil rights attorney whose court victories made headlines. He was the son of a legacy family, a tech real estate hybrid mogul with the kind of jawline magazines adored. When they entered a room, conversations softened, eyes shifted, and the air thickened with a mix of envy and admiration. Someone once wrote in a lifestyle column, If New York had royalty, they would live in Brooklyn Heights, in a restored brownstone owned by the Whitmore Ellises. People didn't know that Maya laughed quietly at that line. She knew what real royalty meant. Black women who built kingdoms out of brick dust and resilience. But she played her role, smiled politely, and allowed herself to be dressed in the mythology of a perfect life. Behind the polished veneer, though, the cracks had begun long before she found the hotel receipt. It was in the way Ethan's mother, a woman who collected pearls the way some people collected grudges, always emphasized Maya's accomplishments with a tone that suggested surprise. It was in the way Ethan's colleagues assumed she must work in PR or fashion or something creative, as if a black woman with courtroom command was a genre they didn't understand. But Maya was patient. She believed in partnership, believed that time and consistency could shift old prejudices. And for a while, she believed Ethan stood with her in that effort. For years, she carried the unspoken burden of being both his wife and his shield, soft enough to be acceptable to his circles, sharp enough to deflect the insults they wrapped in politeness. Ethan saw the insults, yes, but he dismissed them as harmless. "They don't mean anything, babe," he'd say. "Don't give them that power." But that was the problem. They did mean something. They accumulated like dust in corners, building layers of resentment she swept away in silence. Still, love is a powerful negotiator. And there was love between them. At least, there once had been. In the early years, Ethan looked at Maya like she was the axis his world turned around. He bragged to investors about her intelligence, quoted her ideas at conferences, often forgetting to mention they were hers, and kissed her with a hunger that felt like devotion. But slowly, something shifted. His praise became patronizing. His affection became convenient. His attention became scarce. He began working later, traveling more, leaving her with perfectly crafted excuses. He'd call her my rock, yet relied on her silence more than her strength. She didn't notice the fracture lines at first, because that's the thing about women like Maya. They're taught to endure, to be gracious, to be the ones who hold the tapestry together even when the threads are fraying in their hands. It wasn't just the relationship, it was the world around them, shaping, twisting, demanding. When they walked into galas, Ethan was a golden boy. Maya was an accessory with credentials. When he spoke, people leaned in. When she spoke, people blinked twice, startled that beauty came packaged with incisive articulation. Ethan found it amusing. Maya found it exhausting. And in the quiet spaces of their lives, Sunday mornings, late-night dinners, the distance grew so subtly that she mistook it for routine. She told herself, "This is marriage. This is normal. This is how people evolve." She blamed stress, workload, family pressures, anything except the one truth that hovered like smoke. Something in their foundation had begun to rot. The betrayal, when it came, wasn't a sudden storm. It was mold that had been spreading behind the walls for years. Maya remembered a moment 6 months before the receipt. A charity gala. She'd worn an emerald dress that made her skin glow like polished onyx. Ethan barely looked at her, distracted by messages on his phone. She remembered that specific ache, a small, cold pinch beneath her ribs. She had pushed it aside. She had pushed so many things aside because the world demanded they be perfect, and they had complied. But perfection is a performance, and every performance has an intermission. The audience watches the stage. They never see the actors backstage, wiping sweat, hiding flaws, stitching broken pieces together in the dark. Now, with the receipt still tucked inside her clutch, and her suspicions widening into something undeniable, Maya began to replay every moment of their so-called perfect life with unsettling clarity. The compliments that felt like rehearsed lines, the kisses that tasted like absence, the vacations where he spent more time replying to urgent emails than speaking to her. The perfect couple, she realized, had been nothing more than a carefully curated illusion. A brand, a performance, A story told by people who never bothered to ask if she was happy. And as she let herself finally see these cracks, truly see them, something inside her hardened with quiet, unflinching certainty. The world might still believe in the fairy tale of Maya Ellis and Ethan Whitmore. But fairy tales were never written by women like her, and she was done pretending. The night Maya finally typed the name into her phone, she felt something she hadn't expected. Steadiness. Not rage, not sorrow, something colder, calmer, and far more dangerous. The receipt had given her the hotel. Ethan's calendar had given her the pattern, but it was his Uber history, synced to the joint account he assumed she never checked, that gave her the truth. The address appeared again and again. Brooklyn, Williamsburg, a sleek loft building that reeked of curated minimalism and expensive loneliness. The woman's name was Lena Hart. It looked harmless, typed in white letters on a black search bar. Almost delicate. The kind of name you might expect on a gallery wall or a business card with embossed gold lettering. Maya hit enter. A universe unfolded. There she was, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, in tagged photos at rooftop launches and artisan cocktail bars. 28, brand strategist, white, blonde, always styled in a way that suggested she woke up effortlessly radiant, though Maya knew that kind of effortlessness took meticulous work. Scrolling through the curated feed, Maya experienced a strange, disorienting sensation. She wasn't jealous. At least, not in the way she expected. She didn't envy the woman's youth, or her glow, or her social media optimized life. What Maya felt was something far more complicated. Recognition. Lena's captions were full of airy affirmations. Follow the spark. Live your truth. Don't settle for almost. But her eyes, in photo after photo, held the same quiet hunger Maya once had at 28. The yearning to be seen, to be chosen, to be cherished by someone extraordinary. And Ethan had always known how to make a woman feel chosen. Maya's mind replayed the early days of her own relationship with him. The surprise flowers at her office, the long emails about how he'd never met anyone like her, the late-night conversations where he made her feel like the world had shrunk to just the two of them. He'd lavished her with attention so intense it bordered on worship. And now he had simply moved the spotlight. The realization wasn't just painful, it was humiliating. Maya kept digging. Lena's post revealed everything Ethan had told her. Maya recognized the patterns instantly because she was an attorney trained to see inconsistencies the way other people saw colors. A trip to Miami, he told Maya it was a founder's weekend. A tasting menu downtown, he'd said he was entertaining investors. A photo of Lena's hand holding a glass of champagne across a marble counter. Maya recognized the bar. Ethan had once said it was too pretentious to go with her. With every new detail, Maya felt something in her chest tighten, then crystallize. It wasn't grief anymore, it was clarity. And clarity was a sharp, unflinching blade. She clicked on a video clip Lena had recorded. Soft music, sunset by the river. The caption read, "Some people make you feel like home, even when everything else is chaos." Maya exhaled through her nose, a humorless sound. Home. Ethan loved words like that. Words that sounded grand, but were hollow enough to pour himself into without ever filling. But beneath all the curated glow, Maya sensed an innocence in Lena. Dangerous, naive, genuine. Lena wasn't malicious. She wasn't calculating. She was simply living the version of the story Ethan had handed her. The story where Maya was the cold, career-obsessed wife, where the marriage was basically over, where he was trapped but trying. Maya almost pitied her. Almost. Because innocence didn't excuse complicity, not when it lived inside another woman's home, inside another woman's vows, inside another woman's life. Maya began assembling a digital folder, timelines, screenshots, maps, every hotel, every lie, every overlapping hour, every orchestrated deception she'd once been too trusting to question. She labeled each file like an exhibit in a trial. Exhibit A, the first lie. Exhibit B, the pattern. Exhibit C, the replacement. It felt methodical, surgical, as if she were dissecting her own heart with gloves on. And then, late into the night, when the brownstone was quiet and the city hummed like a wounded animal outside her window, Maya searched Lena's name one last time. She found a picture, Lena laughing in Ethan's arms on a sidewalk in Soho. He wasn't wearing his wedding ring. Maya stared at the image, not with jealousy, not with heartbreak, but with a steady, chilling knowledge that this was the moment everything changed. Not because of what Ethan had done, but because of what Maya was now capable of. She didn't slam the laptop shut. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She leaned back in her chair, inhaled slowly, and whispered to herself, "I see you now." Not Lena, not even Ethan. She saw herself, finally, clearly, and understood that what came next would not be a confrontation. It would be a reckoning. Maya wrote the invitations the old-fashioned way, with a fountain pen and linen cardstock thick enough to feel like a verdict. She chose an elegant script, steady, graceful, impossible to misinterpret. The kind of handwriting that said, "What I'm about to do is deliberate." One envelope bore Ethan's name, though she didn't bother to give it to him. It was symbolic, ritualistic, a way of marking the moment she stepped out of the role of the forgiving wife and into something far more dangerous. The second envelope was the real one, addressed to Lena Hart, hand-delivered by Maya herself, placed gently into the building's mail slot as joggers passed and pigeons scattered across the Williamsburg sidewalk. Inside each envelope was a simple line: "You are cordially invited to a private anniversary dinner, Saturday, 8 p.m., our home." No explanation, no threat, just an invitation wrapped in velvet silence. The brownstone became the pressure cooker. Maya stood in the dining room several days before the dinner, staring at the table as the afternoon light spilled across the polished wood. She imagined Ethan sitting at the head, confident and oblivious. Imagined Lena, anxious and confused, seating herself at the place Maya chose. She imagined the moment the truth would detonate between them. A three-person dinner, an audience of two, a single performance. She instructed the house manager, Mrs. Harper, to set 3 places, each setting symmetrical and flawless. A candle centerpiece, fresh lilies, silverware that glinted like sharpened intentions. Mrs. Harper paused when she noticed the third chair. "Expecting company?" Maya smiled, the kind of smile that could frost glass. "Yes," she said, "a very important guest." The house manager did not ask further. Some people sense a storm before the clouds gather. Meanwhile, Ethan floated through the week in a haze of pleasant delusion. He brought Maya coffee in the mornings, humming while the espresso machine sputtered. He texted her midday hearts, the same ones he'd likely sent to Lena an hour earlier. He told her they should plan a weekend in the Hamptons soon, just to reconnect. Reconnect. The word tasted like rust in Maya's mouth. He didn't notice she'd stopped attempting to close the distance. Didn't notice the distance had already consumed them. Men like Ethan always assumed the stability of a woman who loved them was permanent. 2 nights before the dinner, he kissed Maya's forehead, murmuring, "You've been quiet lately. Everything okay?" She studied him for a long moment. His blue eyes, his casually tousled hair, the face she once considered safety. "Yes," she said softly. It was the truth. She was finally okay. But beneath her calm exterior, something dark thrummed. Not rage, no, she'd burned through that already. What remained was purpose. Cold, precise, patient. The day of the dinner arrived with an eerie stillness. Rain tapped against the brownstone windows like a metronome marking the hours. Maya dressed slowly in a black silk dress that framed her shoulders like armor. She left her hair in soft curls, her lips a deep wine red, not seductive, but sovereign. In the kitchen, Mrs. Harper hesitated before speaking. "Are you sure you want to go through with this, Dr. Ellis?" Maya adjusted a glass, aligning it with mathematical accuracy. My entire life has been about doing the right thing, she said. Tonight isn't about what's right. It's about what's true. At 7:12 p.m., Ethan texted, "Running late. Site meeting went long. Be there by 8. Maya checked his location. He was nowhere near a site. She didn't reply. At 7:43 p.m., Maya heard the doorbell. The sound was soft, almost polite, but to Maya, it might as well have been a gunshot echoing through the house. She crossed the hallway with a calmness that defied gravity. When she opened the door, Lena stood there, holding the invitation like a lifeline. Her makeup was subtle, her clothes professional, her expression bewildered. "Mrs. Whitmore?" Lena asked, her voice trembling. Maya smiled gently, almost pityingly. "Please, call me Maya," Lena swallowed. I'm not sure why I'm here." "Oh, I think you are," Maya replied. "Come in." And just like that, the trap closed. Lena stepped into the brownstone, her eyes scanning the immaculate space with dawning dread. Maya gestured toward the dining room, and when Lena saw the table set for 3, only 3, her face drained of color. "You invited me to your anniversary dinner." Maya nodded. "Some truths require an audience, Lena." For a moment, Lena looked like she might faint, or run, or both. Maya didn't stop her, didn't touch her, didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The truth had already pulled the pin from the grenade. All that was left now was to wait for Ethan to walk into the blast radius. Maya took her seat at the head of the table. Lena sat opposite, trembling. The house hummed with silence, and as the clock ticked closer to 8, Maya folded her napkin, lifted her chin, and allowed herself the smallest, slowest smile. It was almost time. The moment Lena Hart stepped over the threshold of the Ellis Whitmore brownstone, the air in the house changed. It thickened, slowly, then all at once, like humidity before a violent summer storm. Maya felt it as a pressure behind her ribs, a tightening that was not fear, but anticipation. The kind of anticipation a courtroom veteran feels when the jury files in with a verdict she already knows. Lena stood in the foyer holding her clutch with both hands, knuckles pale, shoulders trembling in a way that betrayed a truth she hadn't yet spoken. She knew something was wrong. Terribly, unavoidably wrong. "Maya," she said softly, stumbling over the name. I'm confused. I thought maybe this was about work, or that you wanted to talk to me about a project. I never would have." "Lena," Maya interrupted, not unkindly. "Let's go to the dining room." There was no need to draw the moment out, no need to marinate it in melodrama. The table itself, set for 3, was already doing most of the talking. When Lena stepped into the dining room and saw the third chair, her lips parted in a silent gasp. The candlelight flickered across her face, illuminating shock, realization, and finally fear. Not fear of Maya, fear of the truth collapsing around her like a burning building. "Oh God," she whispered. No, this can't be what I think it is." Maya tilted her head, studying her. "And what do you think it is?" Lena stared at the table as if the polished wood had grown teeth. Her voice cracked. Does Ethan know I'm here?" "No," Maya said, "but he will soon." It was almost a kindness telling her that. Almost. Lena pressed a hand to her chest. "I never meant, I swear, if I had known he was still with you." Maya raised a hand, silencing her gently. "That's the thing about meaning well. You still end up in someone else's home, at someone else's anniversary dinner." A tear slipped down Lena's cheek. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't performative. It was the tear of a woman who suddenly understood she'd been living inside a lie. And that lie was wearing Ethan Whitmore's face. "Sit," Maya said softly. Lena obeyed, sinking into her chair like someone awaiting sentencing. The silverware gleamed between them, elegant, untouched, chilling. The lilies in the centerpiece filled the room with a sweet, almost suffocating perfume. Maya joined her at the table, though she didn't yet reach for her wine. She wanted her mind sharp, clear, razor-edged. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. Then Lena whispered, "You're not what he described." Maya's eyes narrowed, but her tone remained calm. "And what did he describe?" A wife who didn't care about him anymore. A marriage that was emotionally dead. Someone who dismissed him, belittled him. He said he felt alone. Maya laughed, but the sound held no humor. It was cold, incredulous, and painfully precise. "Yes," she said, "Ethan does love a narrative in which he is the victim." Lena covered her face. "I feel sick." "Good," Maya replied. "Not because I want you to suffer, but because it means you understand the gravity of what you were part of, whether you knew or not." Lena lowered her hands, eyes red, voice small. "I'm not the kind of woman who goes after married men. Yet here you are," Maya said gently, "in a married woman's home." The front door opened then, loud, carefree. Ethan's voice floated down the hallway, bright with the confidence of a man who believes his world is intact. "Babe, I'm home. Sorry I'm late. Traffic on the bridge was a nightmare." Lena's breath hitched. Maya's pulse did not change by even a beat. Footsteps approached, slow, unbothered. Ethan appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie, scrolling his phone. He didn't see Lena at first. He didn't see the third chair. He didn't see the trap. He saw Maya, and he smiled. "God, you look incredible," he began, until he followed her gaze to the woman across the table. Lena stiffened, gripping the edge of her chair. Ethan froze. In 3 seconds, his expression morphed from confusion to recognition to horror. "Maya," he breathed. Why is she?" "Sit, Ethan." Her voice cut across the room like a sharpened wire. He flinched. Men like him always did when the softness they depended on turned to steel. Slowly, shakily, he lowered himself into the empty chair. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the rain outside seemed to hold its breath. Then Maya leaned forward, folding her hands neatly on the table. "Welcome to our anniversary dinner," she said. "All 3 of us." Ethan swallowed hard. "This isn't Maya. I can explain." She smiled. Beautiful, controlled, terrifying. "That's the beauty of it, Ethan," she murmured. "For once, I don't need your explanations. I have the facts." She reached beside her chair and placed 2 thick envelopes on the table. Lena stared at them as if they might explode. Ethan stared at them as if they already had. Maya tapped a manicured finger against the top envelope. "This," she said, "is the full record of your affair. The timeline, the hotel receipts, the text messages, every lie you've told for the last 18 months. Ethan went pale. "And this," she added, touching the second envelope, "is my response to all of it." Lena whispered, "What's in it?" Maya's smile didn't reach her eyes. Divorce papers. Silence drowned the room. Heavy, final, absolute. Ethan's voice broke first. "Maya, please." "No," she said quietly. "Tonight is the night I speak. You will listen." And for the first time in 10 years, Ethan Whitmore understood. He hadn't married a woman who would crumble. He had married a woman who would rise. And tonight, she was rising right in front of him. For a moment, the only sound in the dining room was the thin, nervous flicker of candle flames. Maya let the silence sit, heavy and suffocating, the way a skilled attorney lets the courtroom feel the weight of an accusation before speaking. Ethan stared at the envelopes like they were live grenades. Lena stared at him like she was seeing a stranger. Maya lifted her wine glass but didn't drink. She held it between her fingers, the crystal catching the light, a small, glittering weapon. 10 years, she began softly. 10 years of marriage. 10 years of building a life. 10 years of believing we were a team. Her gaze never left Ethan's face. He opened his mouth to speak, but she raised a hand and he stopped, the reflex of a man finally recognizing who held power in the room. "In those 10 years, she continued, I learned your tells, your poker face, your lies. I learned the cadence of your guilt and the way your eyes shifted when you said something that wasn't quite true." She tilted her head. Did you really think I wouldn't notice when those tells became routine? Maya, this isn't fair, Ethan started, voice trembling. We we were going through a rough patch. I made mistakes, but it wasn't a mistake, she echoed, her voice sharpening. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or saying something you regret in an argument. You don't accidentally book a boutique hotel in Soho every Wednesday night for 18 months. That, Ethan, is a pattern. And patterns are choices. Lena winced, her hands twisted in her lap. Maya turned to her, eyes gentler, but no less piercing. And you, Lena, tell me, what did he promise you? Lena swallowed hard. He said your marriage was over, that you were practically separated, that you stayed together for appearances and family. He said you didn't. She faltered, shame washing over her face. He said you didn't love him anymore. Maya laughed softly. It was a sound edged with something almost feral. Of course he did, she murmured. Let me guess, he also told you he needed the right time to leave. After a deal closed, after a board meeting, after a holiday, always later. Lena's eyes filled with tears. He said he didn't want to hurt you, that he felt trapped. Maya nodded slowly. Yes, Ethan is very good at being the hero of his own story. She set the glass down, precisely, deliberately. Here's the part he left out, she said, looking between them. We had sex 3 days ago. Silence detonated. Lena's face went white. Ethan's mouth fell open. What? Lena's voice broke. 3 days. But he told me you hadn't touched each other in months, that you were practically roommates. Maya's eyes flashed. Wednesday morning, before he left for work, he kissed me in our shower, told me he was lucky to have a woman like me, then spent the afternoon in your bed. That's who he is. Lena pushed back from the table so fast her chair scraped violently against the hardwood. Oh my God, she choked. Oh my God. Sit, Maya said quietly. There was no threat in it, only authority. You deserve to hear all of this. Lena sank back down, shaking. She wasn't the villain here. Maya knew that now. She was collateral damage. A woman who had believed a man's story because she wanted to. Because he wanted her to. Maya slid the first envelope toward Ethan. Go ahead, she said. Open it. His hands shook as he tore the paper. Inside was a meticulously organized stack of documents. Hotel invoices, screenshots, time-stamped photos, ride histories. His life transcribed into betrayal. You kept all this? He whispered, horror creeping into his voice. Of course, Maya replied. I'm a lawyer, Ethan. I don't go to war without evidence. He flipped through pages, his face draining of color with each turn. What is this supposed to accomplish? He rasped. Humiliate me? Destroy me in front of the woman you lied to almost as much as you lied to me? Maya finished. No, this isn't about humiliation. This is about clarity. She leaned forward, her expression suddenly colder. You are not just a man who slipped up. You are a man who compartmentalizes, who builds parallel universes and expects women to live in them without question. You told me we were solid. You told her you were broken. You let both of us love versions of you that didn't exist. Lena wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. How many times, she whispered, staring at Ethan. How many times have you done this? Something in Ethan's composure cracked. It's not like that. This was different. I love you, Lena, and I love— Don't you dare, Maya cut in. Her voice dropped to a low, lethal register. Don't you dare use that word like a bandage for a wound you caused. She looked at Lena. You want the truth? This isn't his first affair. 2 years ago, there was a junior designer at his firm. It lasted 4 months. He ended it when she started asking to be acknowledged in public. Lena's eyes snapped to Ethan. Is that true? He went very still. It was complicated, he muttered. Maya laughed once. No, it was simple. He needed admiration. He needed novelty. and he needed me to stay exactly where I was while he went chasing shiny things. Ethan's mask slipped entirely now, revealing the raw, selfish panic beneath. "We were unhappy," he burst out. "You were always at the office, always exhausted, always talking about cases and causes and problems. When was the last time you were really present with me, Maya? You pushed me away." Maya's eyes darkened. "There it is," she said softly. "The script. You made me do this. You weren't enough." She shook her head. "I gave up promotions. I adjusted my caseload. I hosted your fundraisers, charmed your investors, endured your family. I contorted myself into a shape that would never threaten your ego. And somehow, you still needed more." She turned to Lena, her voice unexpectedly gentle. "Listen to me carefully. Men like Ethan don't cheat because their partners are not enough. They cheat because nothing will ever be enough. Not admiration, not loyalty, not sacrifice. They drink validation like water, and they are always, always thirsty." Lena stared at the man she thought she loved and saw, for the first time, the emptiness behind his charm. "I didn't know," she whispered to Maya. "I swear, I didn't know it was like this." Maya nodded once. "I believe you." She turned back to Ethan, and when she spoke again, her words were a scalpel. "So here's what happens next," she said. "You will leave this house tonight. You will sign those papers. You will not spin this into a story where I am the cold, bitter ex-wife who drove you into someone else's arms. Because if you do, if you so much as hint at that narrative to anyone, I will make sure the world sees every document on this table." His voice shook. "You'd ruin my career." "No," Maya said. "You did that yourself. I'm just deciding whether the consequences stay private or become public." The candles burned low. The lilies were starting to wilt, their perfume turning slightly sour. The anniversary dinner she'd always imagined once upon a time, laughter, toasts, promises, had been replaced by a trial, a sentencing. And yet, as Maya watched Ethan's shoulders slump, as she watched Lena's heartbreak settle into something more like grim understanding, she felt something she hadn't expected. Not victory, not satisfaction, but release. The perfect marriage was dead. And for the first time in 10 years, she was ready to bury it. The door closed behind Ethan with a soft, final click that sounded far too quiet for what it meant. No slammed wood, no shouted curses, no dramatic suitcase rolling down the brownstone steps. Just that small, almost polite sound, like the universe marking the end of a sentence. Maya stood in the foyer and listened to the silence that followed. It was not the silence of peace. Not yet. It was the silence after an impact. When your ears are still ringing and your body hasn't decided whether to fall apart or keep standing. His footsteps faded down the sidewalk. His shadow, once a permanent presence in the house, slipped out of frame. And then it was just her. The anniversary candles had burned themselves out hours ago. The dining room still smelled faintly of lilies and expensive wine and something else, something acrid and invisible, like the residue of a fire that had started long before anyone noticed the smoke. Maya walked back to the table and looked at the empty chairs. One was hers, one was Lena's, one was his. Lena had left first, clutching the envelope of evidence like a woman carrying her own autopsy report. She'd paused at the door, eyes shining with tears and something harder beneath it. "I'm sorry," she'd whispered, "for what I knew, for what I chose not to know." Maya had simply nodded. "Be sorry for yourself," she'd said. "Then do better with the next version of you." Now Lena was gone. Ethan was gone. The performance was over. The woman who remained was not the wife, not the accessory, not the prop in his success story. She was the one who had ripped the set apart. Maya gathered the plates with mechanical precision, stacking crystal and porcelain as if cleaning could rearrange the reality of her life. The house manager had gone home hours ago at her insistence. Tonight she needed to be alone with the mess. In the kitchen, she turned on the faucet and stared as water rushed into the sink, steam curling upward. The first glass slipped from her fingers and shattered in the basin, shards catching the light. Maya braced her hands on the edge of the counter and bowed her head. This, she thought dimly, is where the women in the stories usually break. This is where they slide down the cabinets and sob until their throats are raw and their mascara runs, and the audience feels satisfied that their pain has been properly displayed. But the tears didn't come. Her chest ached, yes. Her throat burned with unsaid words. Her muscles felt like she had been holding something heavy for so long that her body no longer remembered what it meant to rest. And yet, beneath all of that, something else coiled. Relief. It was thin at first, a fragile thread woven through the enormity of what she'd lost. But it was there. She was no longer being lied to, no longer sharing her bed with a stranger who smiled like a husband and kissed like a thief, no longer gaslighting herself into believing that her instincts were overreactions. The truth hurt, but it hurt cleanly. His lies had been a slow poison. Her phone buzzed on the counter, jolting her back. Messages flooded the screen. Her mother. I heard from your aunt that Ethan left the gala early. Is everything all right? Her colleague. You missed a hell of a board meeting. Everything okay? A friend. Did I just see Ethan leaving your place with a suitcase? Someone had posted a blurry photo to their social circles group chat. Ethan on the sidewalk, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, head down. The caption was a cluster of question marks and fire emojis. News traveled fast in their world. Truth rarely did. Maya turned the phone, face down. She walked upstairs into the bedroom she had shared with him for a decade and stopped in the doorway, struck by how unfamiliar it looked now. Same bed, same crisp sheets, same framed photos on the walls, smiling faces frozen in time. Her in white, him in a tailored suit. Two people who genuinely believed that love and effort would be enough to outrun their own unresolved wounds. She crossed the room slowly, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the indentation on his side of the mattress. A ghost shape, a negative space. Her mind, liberated from the constant effort of denial, began to replay memories with brutal clarity. The night he came home late and smelled faintly of a perfume she didn't own. The way he'd pulled her close and said, "You're imagining things." The weekend he insisted on a solo mental health retreat upstate right after a fight. The hollow apologies. The way he had looked at her body as if it were obligation, not wonder. All the time she gaslit herself to keep the peace. A laugh escaped her then, small, sharp, disbelieving. It startled even her. I stayed, she murmured into the dark room, because I loved the story I thought we were in. That was the cruelest part. She hadn't just loved him, she'd loved the narrative, the brilliant black attorney and the progressive white heir rewriting what power couples could look like. She'd fought so hard to belong in his world that she'd forgotten to ask if that world deserved her. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she glanced at it. Janelle, I'm outside. Open the door. Maya blinked, walked back downstairs. When she opened the door, her younger sister swept in, hair in a messy bun, hoodie thrown on over leggings, eyes blazing. You look like hell, Janelle announced, dropping a grocery bag on the console table. And before you say anything polite, I brought ice cream, wine, and those plantain chips you like. Which item you want first will tell me how bad it is. A broken sound left Maya's throat, half laugh, half sob. It's bad, she said, but I don't want any of it yet. Janelle's face softened. She stepped forward and pulled Maya into a hug that was all arms and history and shared blood. For a moment, Maya allowed herself to lean in, to let her body register that she was not, in fact, entirely alone. Okay, Janelle said against her hair. I saw him leaving, bag and all. You gonna tell me what he did? Or am I just going to assume it's exactly what every man in this city seems genetically programmed to do? Maya exhaled. Affair, 18 months, with a woman who genuinely thought he was leaving me. Janelle pulled back, eyes wide. Oh, he really went for the full cliché package, huh? I invited her to our anniversary dinner, Maya added. Janelle stared at her, then broke into a slow, incredulous grin. You did what? Maya told her. All of it. The receipt, the evidence, the dinner, the envelopes on the table. Janelle listened, jaw clenching and unclenching, hands curled into fists, expressions shifting from fury to awe to something like pride. You burned the whole stage down, she said softly when Maya finished. Good. Maya sank onto the couch, the exhaustion finally catching up. I thought I'd be devastated, she admitted. I thought I'd be on the floor begging him to stay. That's what Mom would have done. Mom also stayed with Dad through 2 affairs and a secret second family, Janelle said flatly. Her choices don't have to be ours. Maya stared at the ceiling. I don't know what tomorrow looks like. Janelle shrugged. Tomorrow looks like you not carrying a man who keeps stabbing holes in the boat. That's a start. For the first time that night, a real smile touched Maya's lips. The body blow had landed. The impact had knocked the air out of her lungs, stolen the future she thought she was walking toward, shattered the mirror she'd been using to measure her worth. But as the night stretched on, as her sister fell asleep on the couch beside her, and the city outside the windows kept breathing, Maya realized something else. She was still here, bruised, exhausted, permanently altered, but upright, somewhere beneath the ache, beneath the humiliation and anger and emptiness. A new truth was taking root, small and stubborn. She had survived every impossible thing the world had thrown at her, long before Ethan Whitmore ever learned her name. She would survive this too, and what came after, for the first time in a very long time, would belong to her. The morning after the anniversary dinner, Maya didn't wake with swollen eyes or a shattered heart. She woke with purpose. It wasn't triumph. There was nothing triumphant about grieving a life you'd built with your bare hands. But there was clarity. Clean, sharp, inevitable. The kind of clarity that comes when you stop fighting to resurrect something that died long before you admitted it. Maya brewed a pot of coffee, stood by the kitchen window, and watched the December sky bloom into a washed-out gray. The brownstone felt different now, emptier, quieter, no longer humming with Ethan's careless footsteps or his phone buzzing with excuses he thought she never questioned. For the first time in years, she could hear her own thoughts. By midday, she was in her home office, sleeves rolled up, laptop open, documents spread across the desk like the aftermath of a controlled explosion. This was her arena. Paper, logic, evidence. If their marriage had become a battleground, she would fight the rest of it on territory where she held every advantage. Her attorney, Simone Rucker, a black woman in her 50s with a voice like velvet-coated steel, arrived exactly on time. Simone had 3 PhDs worth of intimidation in her stare alone, and a reputation for turning high-profile divorces into symphonies of precision. Simone set her briefcase down. I heard about last night. From the legal community? Maya asked. And from my cousin's hairdresser's niece, Simone replied dryly. News travels faster than shame in this city. Maya didn't flinch. Let's get started. They spent hours analyzing finances, property deeds, investment portfolios, brand partnerships, and Ethan's tangled empire of startups and subsidiaries. But the real power lay in what Maya had quietly accumulated. Every credit card statement, every late-night Uber ride, every text screenshot, every hotel invoice, every timeline entry that mapped Ethan's duplicity with academic precision. Simone flipped through the evidence with raised brows. This is exemplary, she said. If law school had final exams like this, half the class would fail. I documented everything, Maya murmured. I needed to understand the shape of the lie. You do realize, Simone said, tapping a stack of papers, that this puts you in the strongest negotiating position I've seen in years? I don't want revenge, Maya said. I want freedom, and I want control over the narrative. Simone smiled like a general surveying a battlefield. Then we'll give him a choice that feels like mercy on the surface and justice underneath. They drafted the settlement, a fair, even generous split of jointly acquired assets. No public statements from either party. A strict non-disclosure agreement. No interviews. No, my wife drove me away sob stories. No brand polishing memoirs in 5 years. Absolute silence on the specifics of the affair. If Ethan violated it, Maya reserved the right to publicly release the evidence she'd gathered. All of it. This is reasonable, Simone said. It's strategic, Maya corrected. I won't be the villain in a narrative he broke. By late afternoon, Ethan's attorney, a man who looked like he billed clients by the breath, requested a virtual meeting. He appeared on the screen, stiff as a press suit. Ethan sat beside him, hair disheveled, pale, wearing the expression of a man who'd finally discovered consequences were real. Maya, he began, voice low, I think we can work through this without all of this. Simone muted their mic, leaned toward Maya, and whispered, translated, he wants everything quiet because he's terrified of the donors, the investors, and his mother. Then she unmuted. Continue. Ethan swallowed. Our marriage had problems. We both know that. I was stupid. I was selfish. But we can get counseling, therapy, a reset, whatever you want. What I want, Maya interrupted, is honesty. Something you never gave me until I forced it out of you at a dinner table. Ethan's jaw tightened. Dragging Lena into that was cruel. Keeping her hidden wasn't? Maya asked lightly. His lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Whitmore is willing to negotiate, but the NDA terms seem overly restrictive. Ethan has a right to tell his side of the story. Maya leaned back in her chair. If Ethan wants to tell his side, she said smoothly, then I will send a neatly organized file to the Times. The one with hotel receipts, texts, GPS data, and the details of his previous affair that he never disclosed. I might even include the timeline of the night he claimed his phone died during an emergency meeting while he was actually, okay, Ethan blurted, panic washing over his face. Okay, stop, just stop. His lawyer glared at him for breaking composure. Maya folded her hands, calm, unmovable. The NDA stands. Ethan looked at her then, not with anger, not even with sorrow, but with something like awe. He had underestimated her. For years. How long have you been preparing this? He asked quietly. 6 weeks, she said. But you never confronted me. I wanted you comfortable enough to keep lying, she replied. It made the evidence easier to collect. His silence shattered into fragments. Simone slid the settlement packet across the table. Sign, Mr. Whitmore, or we go public. Ethan didn't reach for the pen immediately. His voice was brittle. Maya, doesn't our history count for anything? It does, she said softly. It counts as a chapter, not a sentence. He looked down at the documents, his future rewritten, his reputation precarious, his lies exposed. He signed. The ink wasn't even dry before Maya felt something inside her loosen, like a knot that had been holding her upright for years had finally unraveled. But she didn't collapse. She stood taller. When Simone packed her briefcase and squeezed Maya's shoulder before leaving, she said the words Maya didn't know she'd been craving. You didn't lose today, Simone said. You reclaimed. When the brownstone fell silent again, Maya stood in the center of the living room. The papers were signed. The war was over. There were no victory bells, no applause, no triumphant music. Just a woman in a quiet house realizing she had won something far more valuable than the marriage she just ended. Herself. The house was still the next morning, so still it felt like it was holding its breath. For the first time in years, Maya walked through the brownstone without adjusting herself for anyone else's presence. No softening of her tone, no careful steps to avoid waking a husband, no calculated calm to keep the peace. Just her, barefoot on cool hardwood floors, the robe tied loosely around her waist, curls unpinned and free. The silence wasn't empty. It was spacious. She stood in the center of the living room, letting sunlight pour across her face. It felt different now. no longer filtered through the expectations of a man who believed her strength was something to be managed. The light felt like ownership. This was her home, not theirs, hers. She inhaled, slowly, fully, the way she had taught clients to breathe before court hearings. Only this time, she wasn't preparing for a battle. She was preparing for rebirth. The first room she entered was the closet, a cathedral of clothing. Tailored suits, cocktail dresses, cashmere sweaters, an entire wardrobe curated to match Ethan's world. Polished, elegant, impressive without being intimidating. The kind of wardrobe a wife wore when she was expected to look perfect and speak gently. Maya opened the double doors wider. The scent of cedar and Chanel No. 5 drifted out. She reached for a dress Ethan had bought her after a fight, a sapphire sheath dress that cost more than a month's rent for most New Yorkers. He had apologized by slipping it onto their bed, saying, "You look beautiful in blue. I want us to start over." She had worn it then, because she wanted to believe starting over was possible. Now she lifted the hanger and examined the dress like a relic from a religion she no longer worshipped. This dress wasn't love. It was a distraction, a silencer, a bribe. The first item she placed in the donation pile was that dress, then another, and another. Piece by piece, she pulled items from the racks. Clothes Ethan had chosen, clothes she had bought to impress him, clothes she had worn to dinners where she smiled through small humiliations delivered in polite voices. A mountain grew on the guest bed. Buried beneath that mountain were years of compromise, years of swallowing small resentments until they clumped together like stones in the stomach. She was done swallowing anything. Next came the bedroom. She stripped the bed, not carefully, but with a kind of intentional force that felt like cleansing. Sheets, pillowcases, duvet, all of it went into bags. She would not sleep on linens that had absorbed years of lies. The mattress, though, that was trickier. She sat on its edge, palm pressing into the indentation on his side. It was a hollow space, a crater she had curled into for a decade. The place where she had whispered hopes, held anxieties, laughed against his chest. The place where she had convinced herself that proximity was the same as intimacy. Maya's throat tightened, not with grief, but with recognition. She had mistaken closeness for connection. She stood up and ordered a new mattress. A firm one, the kind she liked, the kind he complained hurt his back, the kind she'd never bought because compromise had become her second skin. Not anymore. Then came the bathroom. His cologne, his razor, his hair gel, the fancy skincare he never used but kept because the packaging looked sophisticated. She boxed them quickly, without ceremony. But his wedding ring, left carelessly beside the sink after the night she'd confronted him, that gave her pause. It gleamed under the warm lights, small and symbolic. A circle meant to represent continuity, but in reality, it had been a cage. She didn't throw it out. She didn't stomp on it. She placed it in a drawer. She wanted it out of sight, not erased. Erasure wasn't the goal. Reclamation was. By afternoon, she was in the kitchen, wiping down countertops like she was scrubbing the residue of a decade from the marble. That was when the thought hit her. Her body. Her body had been an extension of their marriage for so long, something she negotiated, tensed, dressed, restrained, tailored. The body that had learned how to look smaller next to his ego, how to stay soft when he was dismissive, how to endure longing, disappointment, and the absence of touch. She touched her own arm, tracing the skin as if reacquainting herself with a limb she'd forgotten belonged to her. She wanted to feel strong again, not performatively strong, not for appearances, not to seem okay. Real strong, a strength that radiated inward first, outward second. She changed into leggings and a tank top, tied her hair into a loose puff, and walked to the mirror. For a second, she barely recognized herself. Not because she looked lost, because she looked uncontained. Her eyes were clearer, her jaw sharper, her posture no longer curved to accommodate someone else's space. This was the woman she might have become 10 years ago if she hadn't spent so much energy minimizing herself to preserve a fragile version of love. She rolled her shoulders back and whispered to the reflection, "I'm still here, not as his wife, not as his story, not as his mirror, as herself." The house felt different by evening, lighter from room to room, humming with an electricity she couldn't quite name. A home doesn't change shape overnight, but a woman can. By the time she slipped into bed, her side, now the only side, there was no ache in her chest, no yearning for what had been lost, only the quiet hum of possibility. Grief hadn't left her. It had just stopped leading. And as she closed her eyes, the last thought that drifted through her mind wasn't about Ethan or betrayal or the wreckage she had endured. It was this: if I can rebuild a home, I can rebuild myself. The Monday after Ethan signed the papers, Maya walked into her law firm not as a wife whose marriage had imploded, nor as a woman quietly managing humiliation, but as a force returning to the arena she once dominated. The elevator doors opened on the 23rd floor of Carver and Hale, and for a moment she just stood there, absorbing the familiar hum, the click of heels on polished floors, the muffled arguments behind conference room glass, the rapid-fire typing of associates terrified of falling behind. It was a symphony she knew intimately, a rhythm she had once set the tempo for. Quite suddenly, she realized how long she'd been functioning at half volume. Colleagues looked up as she walked past, some with surprise, others with curiosity, a few with concern they were too polite to voice. Her presence shifted something in the hallway, sharpened its edges. Maya had always been respected, admired even, but today she moved with an air that told everyone the part of herself she had held back, softened, muted, was no longer restrained. Her assistant, Danny, met her at her office door with wide eyes. You're early." "I'm ready," Maya said simply. Danny hesitated. "Ready for everything." The office was exactly as she'd left it, organized, minimalist, efficient. Yet it felt like a different room entirely. She saw the subtle traces of herself everywhere: case files she'd stayed late for, books she'd underlined, post-it notes for moments of inspiration between exhaustion and compromise. She remembered the nights she'd left early to fix Ethan's moods, or skip major networking events to accommodate his schedule, or decline the senior partnership push because he had said the hours would tear them apart. She had believed him. She had chosen them over her, and he had still torn them apart. But now that part of her life was over. "Danny," she said, loosening her coat, "bring me the Carter case files, and the deposition summaries, and the briefs for the Grant Foundation lawsuit." Danny blinked. "All of them?" "Yes," Maya replied, "all of them. And schedule me for tonight's strategy session with the board." "I'm back." For the first time in months, Danny grinned. "Yes, ma'am." Once her assistant left, Maya sat at her desk, fingertips grazing the leather pad. A strange warmth rose in her chest. Not joy, not pride, but something stronger. Our own shirt. She began reading, annotating, analyzing with the sharp precision she'd honed before love, marriage, and compromise had reshaped her priorities. Her mind sharpened like a blade put back to the whetstone after rusting under domestic softness. Hours passed without her noticing. When the senior partners filed into the conference room that evening, Maya followed them. A few glanced her way with raised brows, surprised that she was attending the meeting she previously declined to balance her marriage. But Maya slid into her seat with effortless command. The discussion revolved around a major civil rights case involving discriminatory hiring practices at a high-profile corporation. Tension hung thick. The partners debated strategy, litigation risks, jury sympathy, and PR fallout. Then she spoke. Her voice was calm but carried a gravitational pull that bent the room toward her. "We've been approaching this from the wrong angle," she said, flipping through pages she'd annotated with ruthless clarity. "The language in the company's internal memos isn't just discriminatory, it's systemic intent. We anchor our case on that pattern, subpoena the hiring algorithms they claim are neutral, and build a narrative around technological bias, reinforcing human bias. The room stilled. One partner frowned. Those algorithms are proprietary. They'll never release them. They won't have a choice, Maya replied. We file an emergency motion for access based on public interest. No judge will deny it, not with the evidence we've already secured. Another partner leaned forward. If we do that, we're setting a precedent. Maya met their gaze evenly. Exactly. Silence. Then nods, one by one. The managing partner, a man who rarely expressed emotion, said, Ellis, that is brilliant. Maya didn't smile. She simply sat back, the faintest lift of her chin, acknowledging what she already knew. She was brilliant. She always had been. She just spent years giving her brilliance to a man who didn't know what to do with it. That night, after the meeting, she lingered in her office. The city stretched outside her window, New York twinkling like a living organism, pulsing with ambition and opportunity. The skyline she used to associate with Ethan's legacy now reflected something else entirely. Possibility. Her phone buzzed with messages, colleagues praising her strategy, requesting meetings, asking for her insight. She was no longer background brilliance. She was central. For the first time in a long while, Maya allowed herself to imagine the future she had once been too cautious to pursue. Senior partnership, leading litigation teams, mentoring young attorneys who saw in her what she once struggled to see in herself. She remembered Ethan saying, "You don't want the partnership track. Trust me. It'll drain you. We won't have time together." She had believed him. Now she understood he hadn't been warning her. He had been protecting his comfort, his spotlight, his throne. She opened a drawer and pulled out the partnership offer she had rejected a year ago. Her signature line was still blank. Not for long. With the steady hand of a woman reclaiming her destiny, she signed her name. Maya Ellis, partner. The ink glided across the page, final and irrevocable. A small, unexpected laugh escaped her. A sound smooth and rich and full of something she hadn't felt in months. Not happiness, not relief, power. When she turned off her office lights and stepped into the elevator that night, she felt taller, fuller, more herself than she had been in years. She had mourned the marriage. Now she was rising from its ashes. And this time, she would not rise quietly. 3 months after the marriage detonated, Maya Ellis stepped into the marble lobby of Whitmore Innovations, the empire Ethan had built, polished, and wrapped in self-made mythology. The building towered above the Manhattan streets like a testament to ego disguised as vision. Maya didn't come here to reminisce. She came to collect. The receptionist recognized her immediately. Everyone in Ethan's orbit had once known her as the gracious, brilliant, impeccably put-together wife who smoothed rough edges and charmed investors. Now the receptionist blinked, startled by the aura she carried. Charcoal suit sharp enough to cut glass, eyes colder, posture unyielding. Miss Ellis?" the woman stammered. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Maya replied, "but Ethan will make time." Something in her tone, measured steel, unshakable certainty, made the receptionist pick up the phone without hesitation. Within minutes, Ethan appeared by the elevator bank. He had lost weight. His eyes carried shadows. His expensive suit hung on him like it had given up. Gone was the charismatic CEO who dazzled at galas. This Ethan was frayed, thinner around the edges, stripped of the protective glow she once gave him simply by standing at his side. "Maya," he said, attempting a smile that collapsed halfway. "This is unexpected." "Your office," she said. He hesitated, looking around at the employees pretending not to watch. Maya didn't blink. "Unless you prefer to have this conversation in front of your staff." He swallowed. "Right. Come on." They walked in silence to his corner office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city that had once been theirs, or at least he'd made her believe it was. Now, Maya looked out at the skyline, not with nostalgia, but with hunger, ambition, freedom. He gestured stiffly. "Have a seat." "No," she said, remaining standing, his brow furrowed. What do you want, Maya? A withdrawal. He blinked. A what? From the dockside redevelopment bid, she said. Your company is pitching against my client. Ethan's confusion melted into disbelief. Wait, this is about work? Yes, she said. This is strictly business. His laugh was short, disbelieving. Maya, this is a $30 million contract. My team has been working on it for months. There's no way I'm pulling out. You will, she said, opening her briefcase. Inside were documents, not the marital evidence she had used to end their marriage, but something far more dangerous to him professionally. She set them on his desk with calm deliberation. Financial irregularities, zoning violations, environmental compliance shortcuts, a series of expedited approvals obtained through channels no one would call legal. He stiffened. Where did you get these? I'm a civil rights attorney, she said. Misconduct leaves footprints. Yours aren't subtle. His face drained of color. Maya, these are private, confidential. You can't. She met his gaze, unwavering. I can, and I will. He stood abruptly. This is blackmail. This is leverage, she corrected. Something you taught me to use every day of our marriage. He opened his mouth, but no words formed. Maya tapped the files. If Rothmore Properties sees this, your bid evaporates. If the Department of Buildings sees it, you face fines. If the press sees it, she paused, your reputation won't recover. Ethan lowered himself into his chair like someone who suddenly understood gravity. Why are you doing this? Because my client, Maya said, will actually build affordable housing instead of another row of ghost condos for foreign investors. Because communities deserve better than the shortcuts you've been taking. And because, Ethan, she leaned forward, her voice soft and lethal. You owe me. His eyes widened. For the marriage? Maya, I'm sorry. This isn't about love, she snapped. Love is gone. This is about balance. You want to ruin me. I don't want to ruin you, she said. I want you to face consequences. He pressed his hands against his eyes. You already won. You got the house, the settlement, the NDA. What more do you want? Maya straightened. I want the world you walk through to stop bending for you. Just once, I want you to feel what it's like to be held accountable. He laughed again, but now it was hollow, breaking apart. Who are you? She didn't answer immediately. She let him sit with the question. Let him look at the woman he had underestimated, diminished, lied to, betrayed, and dismissed as too ambitious. Finally, she said, I'm who I was always capable of being. You just never saw me because you were too busy looking for someone to orbit you. He swallowed hard. And if I don't withdraw, she collected the documents neatly. You'll lose a lot more than a contract. Silence spread across the office, slow and suffocating. Then Ethan's shoulders slumped in resignation. Fine, I'll pull the bid. Good choice, Maya said. He lifted his gaze to hers, haunted, bewildered, reverent in a way he never was when they were married. When did you become this ruthless? Ruthless? She almost smiled. I've always been strategic. I just stopped using my strategy to protect you. She turned toward the door. Maya, he said quietly, did you ever love me? She paused. The question was sharp, cutting deeper than she expected. She turned back, meeting his gaze with clarity that felt like oxygen. Yes, she said, I loved the man you pretended to be, the man you could have been, but not the man you chose to be. He nodded slowly, absorbing the truth he'd run from for years. And now? He asked. Now? Maya exhaled softly. I don't love you, but I don't hate you either. I simply outgrew you. She left him in that office, surrounded by glass walls, drowning in a skyline he used to believe belonged to him. As Maya stepped into the elevator, her reflection stared back, poised, unbreakable, and finally aligned with who she was meant to be. Professional revenge wasn't loud. It didn't scream or shatter or explode. It was quiet, decisive, precise. And Maya Ellis delivered it with the elegance of a woman reclaiming everything she lost while loving a man who never deserved her. The doors slid shut. The elevator descended, and Maya rose. It was a cold March afternoon when Maya agreed to meet Lena Hart again. The text had come 2 weeks earlier, cautious and almost apologetic. "Hi, it's Lena. I got your number from Simone. If you'd rather never hear from me again, I understand. But I keep replaying that night. I can't seem to breathe around the guilt. If you're ever open to coffee, I'd like to face what I was part of, even if it's just once." Maya had stared at the message longer than she cared to admit. There were simpler options. She could ignore it, block the number, let Lena become a distant character in a painful chapter she'd already closed. But the truth was, Maya wasn't haunted by Ethan anymore. She was haunted by the version of herself who once believed women like Lena were the problem. So she said yes. They chose a cafe in Harlem, Maya's choice. She wanted neutral ground, but not a neutral story. Harlem had seen too much, survived too much, rebuilt itself too many times to be just another backdrop. The cafe was small and warm, with exposed brick and the smell of cardamom and espresso hanging thick in the air. Lena was already there when Maya arrived, hands wrapped around a mug like it was an anchor in a storm. She looked different, less polished, less curated. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun, wisps escaping at her temples. The makeup was lighter, eyes still rimmed red in that way people get when they haven't been sleeping properly. She wore a simple sweater and jeans instead of the designer-like minimalism Maya had seen on Instagram. When she saw Maya, she stood up quickly. "Hi," Lena said, voice small. "Thank you for coming." Maya shrugged out of her coat and sat down. "You wanted to talk." Lena nodded, throat working. "I did. I owe you more than a text apology." Maya studied her for a moment. In another life, they might have met at a networking event. Two ambitious women in a room full of men who thought they were clever, trading knowing glances, laughing about shared frustrations. In another life, they might have collaborated on a campaign, a case, an initiative. In this life, they met because of a man who needed admiration like oxygen. "Then talk," Maya said gently. Lena exhaled, shaking. "I hate that my face is part of your worst memories," she blurted. "I hate that my name will always be attached to the night you destroyed your marriage because he lied to us both. I keep thinking, how could I have been so stupid?" Maya tilted her head. "Were you stupid?" she asked. "Or did you believe someone who was very good at being believed?" Lena's eyes filled. "Both," she whispered. "He told me you were done, that you were cold, that you made him feel small, that he was staying for optics and family. I bought all of it. I wanted to. I think that's the worst part, the wanting," Maya said quietly. Lena nodded, tears finally spilling over. "I like the story where I was the one he chose, the one he risked everything for, the one who understood him better than his wife did. It made me feel special. And I ignored all the red flags because that feeling was addictive." Maya's chest tightened, not with anger, but with recognition. "I know what that's like," she admitted. "Different man, same addiction. I spent years ignoring red flags because I loved the story more than the reality." Lena blinked. "You?" "Of course," Maya said. "You think I didn't see the way his mother spoke to me? You think I didn't clock the way he made jokes about my career being too intense, or my passion being a lot in front of his friends? I saw it. I just interpreted it as something I could fix, or something I had to endure to keep the story intact." Lena sucked in a breath. "So we both chose the story over ourselves." Exactly. They sat with that for a moment. The cafe's background noise, steaming milk, clinking cups, low music, made a soft cocoon around their table. Lena wiped her cheeks, then gave a hoarse laugh. "My therapist says I have a pattern. Emotionally unavailable men. Men who are almost divorced, almost single, always almost. She says I mistake chaos for passion." "Your therapist is right," Maya said. But at least you're in therapy. That's more than most. Lena studied her. You don't hate me? Maya thought about that carefully. I hated you before I knew you, she said. I needed you to be the villain. It was easier to blame the woman who came after than the man who made the promise first. But then I watched you at that table. You weren't scheming, you were wrecked. You were learning in real time that you'd built your feelings on his lies. Lena swallowed. I wanted to scream at him that night. To you, to myself. I walked home shaking so hard I almost fell on the subway stairs. Good, Maya said quietly. That means your conscience works. Lena huffed a wet laugh. Barely. I quit my job, you know. Maya's brows lifted. You did? I couldn't sit in those branding meetings, Lena said. Pitching authenticity while knowing I've been living in the most counterfeit version of love. My boss told me I was stupid. Said I should separate personal from professional. But everything felt tainted. So what now? Maya asked. Lena's eyes sparked with the faintest hint of something that wasn't pain. I started my own consultancy. Small, messy, terrifying, but it's mine. No married bosses, no affairs, no pretending the story matches the reality. Maya nodded slowly. Good. Silence again, but softer now. Can I ask you something? Lena said hesitantly. Go ahead. The night of the dinner, Lena whispered, you looked untouchable, like everything was breaking and you were still made of glass and steel. Were you scared at all? Maya considered. Not of him, she said, not even of losing the marriage. The thing that terrified me most was the possibility that I'd let all of it turn me bitter, that I'd become someone who never trusted again, someone who shrank just to feel safe. And now? Lena asked. Now, Maya said slowly, I'm less afraid. I know what I'll never tolerate again. I know what love is not. That's worth something. Lena watched her with a kind of quiet awe. You gave me that, she said. The night at your table. You showed me what it looks like when a woman refuses to make herself small for a man who's broken her. Maya's throat tightened in a way depositions never triggered. I didn't do that for you, she said. I did it for me. I know, Lena replied, but I saw it, and now I can't unsee it. I left him after that. I left my job. I left the version of myself who thought being loved meant being chosen at someone else's expense. She smiled weakly. You didn't just end your marriage that night. You ended my delusion, too. The weight between them shifted then. They weren't friends. They weren't enemies. They were something else. Two women who had seen each other at their most exposed, bound not by affection or history, but by having survived the same man's unfinished, fractured version of love. Let me be very clear, Maya said at last. We will never be close. I don't have that in me. Not with you. But I don't need to hate you. I don't need to carry you as a wound. Lena nodded, eyes wet, but steadier. That's more grace than I deserve. Maya looked her straight in the eye. What you deserve now, she said, is better choices. Start there. Lena exhaled like she'd been given permission to live. They finished their coffee with small, scattered conversation. Work, the city, therapy, the weirdness of becoming that story in certain circles. When they finally stood to leave, they shared no dramatic embrace, no tearful reconciliation, just a simple, mutual acknowledgement. I hope, Maya said quietly, the next time a man asks you to keep his secrets, you ask yourself what part of you has to disappear to make room for them. I will, Lena replied. Then after a beat, and I hope the next time you love someone, they meet you where you are, instead of asking you to dim. Maya almost smiled. So do I. They walked out into the city, turning in opposite directions. The man who once connected them no longer stood at the center of their lives. He had become an afterthought, a lesson, a cautionary tale. The real story now was this: two women moving forward separately, not as rivals, not as replacements, but as mirrors that had once reflected each other's pain and now reflected each other's possibility. Spring arrived early that year, creeping into New York with soft breezes and shy bursts of sunlight that lingered on fire escapes in brownstone stoops. People called it unseasonable warmth. Maya called it alignment. The world outside felt as if it were thawing at the same pace she was. She had signed her partnership papers. She had rebuilt her home. She had reclaimed her body and her ambition. Now she wanted something bigger, something beyond the courthouse, beyond her own healing, beyond the quiet victories she'd carved out of devastation. She wanted impact, legacy, a ripple effect that would outlive the ruins of her marriage. The idea first came to her during a deposition, one of those long, soul-draining sessions where senior male attorneys subtly questioned the competence of junior women, especially women of color. She watched a young black associate at the far end of the table shrink an inch smaller each time she was interrupted. With every dismissal, she folded into herself like origami pulled too tight. Maya recognized the posture instantly. It was the same one she had worn early in her career, the same one her mother had worn in corporate offices that pretended diversity meant letting one black woman sit in the meeting but never fully speak. The same one that had followed her through law school, her clerkship, even her first years at Carver and Hale. Her fingers tightened around her pen. No more. That night she drafted the proposal. By morning, she had a complete outline for what she called the Ellis Initiative, a mentorship and advocacy program for young women attorneys, especially black and brown women, who were entering a profession still shaped by old power, old money, old prejudices. It would offer workshops, legal clinics, negotiation training, confidence coaching, and one-on-one mentorship. Not from people who studied oppression academically, but from women who had lived it. When she presented the idea to the firm's board, several partners exchanged looks, some enthusiastic, some skeptical, some fearful of what it meant for the status quo. But Maya stood at the head of the long mahogany table, shoulders straight, voice steady. For years, she began, law firms have asked women, especially women of color, to navigate an environment never designed for us. We were expected to shrink ourselves, soften our brilliance, and pretend we were grateful for scraps, while our ideas were repackaged and praised in someone else's voice. A murmur rippled through the room, but she continued. The Ellis Initiative isn't about optics. It's about infrastructure. It's about shifting a culture that has relied on our labor, but rarely invested in our growth. I'm not asking for permission. I'm asking for partnership. Silence. Then slowly, the managing partner nodded. Let's fund it, he said, and let's put your name on it. Maya didn't smile. She only said, good, it's time. The launch event took place on the rooftop of a boutique hotel in Soho, a space lush with greenery and golden light, overlooking the skyline as dusk painted everything in shades of lavender and silver. Soft jazz floated through the air. Small round tables were arranged for conversation. Her mentees, 40 in all, milled around nervously, bright-eyed and eager. Maya arrived in a tailored white suit that contrasted against her skin like a declaration. She was no longer blending into anyone's story. She was writing her own. Her speech was short, powerful, and intimate. When I was a young lawyer, she said, I thought being capable meant being quiet. I thought being strong meant enduring alone. I thought being chosen meant being valued. I was wrong. Strength isn't silence. Excellence isn't erasure. And no one, not a partner, not a firm, not a man, gets to decide your worth. Applause rose like a wave, but Maya barely noticed it. Her eyes were on the women in front of her, each one a version of herself she wished she could go back and protect. After the speech, she floated through the room, speaking to mentees individually. One young Latina attorney clutched Maya's hand with trembling fingers. I've never seen someone like me at the top, she whispered. Until you. Another, a South Asian associate with fierce eyes, said, Your story got me through divorce last year. You reminded me I wasn't crazy for leaving someone who kept dimming me. Maya held each story carefully, like a fragile truth passed from one woman to another. Later, as the sky darkened into a jeweled midnight, She stepped aside to catch her breath. That's when she noticed a familiar figure in the crowd. Lena, the other woman. She wasn't hiding at the edges or slinking through shadows. She stood among the mentors, shoulders straight, offering branding advice to a nervous young attorney. There was an ease to her now, a groundedness Maya hadn't seen before. She had grown into someone steadier. Their eyes met across the rooftop. Lena lifted her glass in a small, respectful salute. Maya nodded back. No bitterness, no tension, just two women sharing parallel chapters. Simone joined Maya at the railing, handing her a glass of herbal tea. You did something important tonight, she said. Not for the firm, for them. For us, Maya corrected. Simone smiled. For us. A breeze swept across the rooftop, cool and carrying the scent of jasmine from the planters. Maya closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, feeling, for the first time in a long time, not just alive, but aligned. She thought about the girl she once was, the one who whispered her brilliance instead of claiming it, the one who believed worth came from external validation, the one who stayed too long in love with a man, but too short in love with herself. Now, she was someone else, someone she had fought to reclaim, someone she had chosen deliberately. Mentorship wasn't charity. It wasn't healing. It wasn't repair. It was legacy. Women lifting women, women expanding women, women refusing to shrink ever again. As the party began to wind down, Maya raised her glass slightly, just to herself, to the beginning of something new, not built from survival, but from sovereignty. The first time Maya met Noah Carter, she wasn't looking for anything, least of all romance. She had come to a charity gala for a community housing initiative her firm supported, expecting an evening of polite small talk, speeches, and strategically timed exits. The kind of event where appearances mattered more than connection. But connection has a strange way of finding people right when they stop chasing it. He was standing near an exhibit of architectural renderings, sleek, sustainable housing projects designed for families displaced by rising rents. He had a presence that didn't demand attention, yet drew it anyway. Tall, broad-shouldered, with warm brown skin and salt and pepper curls that made him appear both distinguished and entirely approachable. His suit wasn't designer, just well-fitted, chosen with care rather than vanity. What struck Maya first wasn't his appearance. It was his posture. He wasn't scanning the room for someone more important. He wasn't performing charm. He was listening intently to a young volunteer explaining zoning restrictions. When their eyes met, something settled inside her. Not fireworks, not the dizzying rush she once mistook for love. Something steadier, a hum in the background of her chest. He smiled, slow, warm, sincere. Dr. Ellis, he said, as if her name mattered, not her reputation. I've heard a lot about your work. Good things, I hope, she replied. Accurate things, he corrected. Your litigation against Knoxbury Development? Brilliant. You forced an entire district to adopt equitable bidding practices. Maya blinked. Men usually complimented her dresses, her poise, her ability to make any room look elegant, not her legal victories. Thank you, she said, measuring him with the calculated caution of a woman rebuilt. He extended a hand. Noah Carter, architect, urban design nerd, occasional troublemaker. She shook it. His grip was firm without being possessive. I'm familiar with your work, she admitted. You designed the East River Green Renewal. He looked surprised. Most people only remember the bike path. Most people aren't litigators who deal with municipal ordinances, she replied. He laughed, a warm, unguarded sound. And just like that, the conversation unfolded. Effortless. They spoke about housing justice, gentrification, the ethics of development, the politics of public space. It felt less like meeting someone new and more like recognizing someone she'd unknowingly been in conversation with for years. Not once did he interrupt her. Not once did he diminish her expertise. Not once did he look away when she spoke. Instead, he listened like a man who understood that intelligence wasn't a threat. It was a gift. When their discussion finally paused, he glanced at her with a faint, curious smile. "Would you like to grab coffee sometime? No pressure, no expectations, just good conversation." Maya hesitated, not because she didn't want to, but because she needed clarity, boundaries, agency. So she asked the questions she once feared would push men away. "Are you looking for something serious?" Noah shook his head lightly. "I'm looking for honesty and respect and mutual curiosity. Something steady, not rushed." He paused. "I've been through my own version of heartbreak. I'm not interested in recreating patterns." Something inside Maya unclenched. She nodded. "Coffee then." Their first date was simple. A small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a florist in Fort Greene. Warm light, mismatched chairs, the smell of cinnamon and freshly ground beans. Maya arrived early, an old habit from years of overcompensating. Noah arrived on time, an act of respect rather than oversight. When he sat down, he didn't lean in too close or dominate the space. He didn't try to impress her with rehearsed stories or exaggerations. He just smiled and asked, "How's your week been?" Like he genuinely wanted the unvarnished truth. So she told him the truth, not the polished version she'd offered strangers, not the curated version she'd shared with media outlets, the real version. The nights she lay awake wondering how she missed the signs, the days she felt powerful and then suddenly tired, the moments she still found herself flinching from memories. Noah didn't react with pity. He didn't say, "You deserve better," or "his loss," or any of the pre-packaged sympathy lines men used when they didn't know what to do with a strong woman's heartbreak. He simply said, "Thank you for trusting me with that." Then he told her about his own marriage, how it ended quietly, not violently, because two people who once loved each other slowly became strangers. He spoke with humility, not blame, accountability, not bitterness. Their coffee turned into a walk. Their walk turned into laughter. Laughter turned into comfort. What struck Maya most wasn't how much they had in common, but how much she didn't have to perform. She didn't have to shrink, soften, or dim anything. She could be incisive, passionate, opinionated, assertive, and he matched her, not resisted her. At the end of the date, Noah asked if she wanted dinner sometime. She said yes, then added, "But I pay for myself." He grinned. Wouldn't have it any other way. Over the next several weeks, they built something that didn't feel like romance at first. It felt like restoration. He noticed the small details, not the performative ones. He asked questions and listened like he was mapping the architecture of her mind. He respected her boundaries. He never tried to fix her pain. He let her talk about Ethan without flinching, without insecurity. He didn't offer to carry her burdens. He offered to walk beside her while she carried her own. One night, after a late dinner in the West Village, they ended up on the Brooklyn Bridge. The city glittered around them, lights on the water, traffic humming beneath their feet. Noah leaned against the railing and looked at her, not with desire but with reverence. "Tell me something," he said. "What does love look like to you now?" She considered the question, deeply, honestly. "Love," she said slowly, "looks like two whole people choosing each other without asking either one to shrink." He smiled, a soft curve of lips that felt like an answer. "Then I hope," he said gently, "that whatever this becomes, friends, something more, something in between, I hope it's something where neither of us ever has to make ourselves smaller." Maya felt that settle in her chest, quiet, profound. A year ago, those words would have terrified her. Now they felt like sunlight filtering through a once-closed window. Noah reached for her hand. She let him, not because she needed someone, not because she feared being alone, but because for the first time in a long time, she wanted connection without losing herself. Love wasn't the goal. Expansion was. Alignment was. And when she looked at Noah, steady, respectful, grounded, she realized something remarkable. She could grow next to him, without bending, without dimming, without disappearing. Love, she finally understood, wasn't about fitting into someone else's life like a puzzle piece. It was standing fully in your own life and finding someone who made the view even more beautiful. Without shrinking, a year to the day after the dinner that ended her marriage, Maya stood on another rooftop, under another sky, in the same city that had once felt like Ethan's kingdom. Tonight, New York didn't feel like his anymore. It felt like hers. Every glowing window, every pulse of traffic, every streak of light on the East River. Below her, Manhattan unfurled like a living constellation. The air was crisp, the kind that stung just enough to remind you were alive. Strings of warm lights looped across the rooftop, casting soft halos over groups of people talking, laughing, leaning in. The Ellis Initiative's first-year celebration was in full swing. Mentees, mentors, colleagues, judges, community leaders, women in sharp suits and bright dresses, their voices weaving together into a tapestry of possibility. Maya stepped away from the cluster of guests and moved toward the edge of the terrace, resting her hands lightly on the railing. From here, she could see almost everything. The bridges like arteries, the brownstones lined up like sentences, the skyscrapers punctuating the skyline with exclamation points. A city built on ambition and contradiction, just like her. Behind her, a familiar voice spoke. "You disappeared." She turned to find Janelle, drink in hand, curls piled high, wearing a grin that was equal parts mischief and pride. "Just catching my breath," Maya said. Janelle bumped her shoulder gently. "You know you just gave a room full of overachievers permission to stop apologizing for being too much, right? That speech? Yeah. They're going to be quoting you in their group chats for months." Maya rolled her eyes lightly. "I just told the truth." "Exactly," Janelle said. "That's what scares people, and what saves them." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Maya watched one of her mentees laughing with a judge who once barely made eye contact with junior attorneys. Now he listened, really listened, as the young woman talked animatedly about a case she was building. "Do you ever miss it?" Janelle asked quietly. "The old life?" Maya thought about the question, about the brownstone when it echoed with a plural instead of a singular, about the annotated calendars, shared bank accounts, matching holiday photos, about the woman she'd been, the one who tried so hard to be the perfect wife in a world wired against her. "I don't miss him," she said. "I miss the version of myself who still believed love meant safety. But I wouldn't go back to her, even if I could." Janelle smiled softly. "She walked you here." "She did," Maya agreed. And then she stepped aside. As if summoned by the thought, her phone buzzed in her clutch. She glanced at the screen. A text from an unknown number. "Saw the article about your mentorship program. Impressive. Congratulations. E." For a moment, the past flickered at the edges of her mind, like a ghost skimming along the surface of a mirror. She didn't feel anger, or longing, or even satisfaction. She felt nothing. Maya deleted the message and slid the phone back, as casually as if she dismissed a spam notification. That chapter was closed so thoroughly it didn't even need a lock. Inside the glass doors, she caught sight of Noah near the bar, deep in conversation with one of the mentees about community-based design. He gestured at a sketch on a napkin, listening as the young woman pointed out potential accessibility issues. His brow furrowed in concentration. Then he nodded, genuinely appreciative. He felt her looking and glanced up. The easy smile he gave her didn't ask anything of her. It just said, "I see you. I'm here." There was still space between them, intentional, respectful. They hadn't rushed into labels or promises. They were building something measured, honest, rooted in mutual growth rather than mutual dependency. She didn't need him, and that was exactly why she could choose him. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a message from one of her mentees. "Thank you for tonight. You showed me what's possible when a woman refuses to make herself small so someone else can feel big. I'm never going back." Maya's chest tightened in the best way. She typed back, "Good, neither am I." She slipped the phone away and looked out over the city one last time, letting memories play in order, like a film she'd finally made peace with. The receipt in the jacket pocket. The dinner from hell. The door click as Ethan left. The ink on the divorce papers. The first night she slept alone in a bed that no longer felt like failure. The cases she took back. The deals she won. The young women who now looked at her and saw a blueprint, not a cautionary tale. There had been days when the grief felt like a second skin. Days when she wondered if she'd ever trust herself again, trust love again, trust her own judgment after ignoring so many red flags for so long. But standing here now, on this rooftop above the city that once threatened to swallow her, she saw the truth clearly. She didn't just survive him, she survived the version of herself who believed being loved meant being less. You cannot build a life on someone else's betrayal of your trust. You cannot create a healthy partnership with someone who needs you to shrink just to fit beside them. You cannot call it love if you have to abandon yourself to keep it. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Somewhere else, someone laughed too loudly. Somewhere below, a couple argued on the sidewalk. Elsewhere, someone fell in love for the first time. The city moved on, relentless and beautiful. So did she. Maya took one last deep breath and turned back toward the party, toward the women she was mentoring, toward the work that fed her, toward the man who liked her exactly as large as she was, toward the life she was writing now with her own hands. She had been the devoted wife, the supporting character, the elegant accessory. Now, she was the story. If Maya's journey made something in you ache, heal, or wake up, don't let it sit quietly in your chest. Share what part hit you the hardest. Tell this story to someone who needs reminding they never have to shrink to be loved. Tap that like and follow along for more stories of women who stop surviving and start choosing themselves.